Well, I think that we're going to give our listeners a treat today. And what I'd like to offer them is if you could take us through like a journey, a timeline, if you will, of
Mm,
some of the things that have been
sure.
challenging for you throughout your life. I'd love to start somewhere in the past, dig into the challenge and
Yeah.
what you learned from it, and we'll take it from there one step at a time. So please start with wherever you'd like in the past, the
This,
challenge.
yeah, this is pretty easy for me because I can take you back to a time. I got started early, Matt, in the entrepreneurial journey. I was 18 years old when we started our first business. And I kind of did the grit and determination thing for, the first 10 years of my career. And that panned out okay, but it was hard. And then I repeated that cycle for the next 10 years and just kind of figured it out. And then a buddy of mine invited me to join a mastermind group. And I didn't even know what a mastermind group was at the time. This has been, 2.5 decades ago now. But I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't transparent. And oftentimes I wasn't authentic. I used to tease people and say, I don't lie. I just make things interesting, right? We'll just kind of ad lib a little bit, kind of give a few more details maybe than actually happened. And I'm just making it fun. I'm making it interesting. And a buddy of mine called me out on that. He said, that's called a lie. And I'm like, well, I don't really like to look at it that way, but I wanted everybody to think I had it figured out, right? I had a pretty big ego. I was pretty condescending when I was young because I came from a really broke environment and we sold out to a Fortune 500 when I was 27. So I thought I was the golden boy. I was like, hey, I can make this thing happen. And then I repeated that again. And then I was humbled back in 2001 with a automobile accident that took the life of a pedestrian. And it really set me on my heels and made me to really reevaluate my life and the things that I was living for, and became much more authentic, a lot more vulnerable, a lot more transparent. And I found out that at the intersection of vulnerability and transparency is where real strength begins. And my buddies from that standpoint, called the Eagles, a mastermind group that I was invited into, helped me understand what being a real man was and how we can be authentic and transparent along the way and really radically transform the lives of other people. So the biggest challenge for me early on was being that authentic, vulnerable,
Mm.
transparent man.
And as you were as you were in that phase in your life where you had the big ego and you were grinding it out and figuring things out in business, you just share with us that there was a kind of a traumatic experience, a moment where you kind of had this
Right.
this realization. And I wonder how aware you were leading up to that challenging moment. I wonder how aware you were of your inauthenticity. Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't aware of it at all. And through that humbling experience, being able to reflect and think back, and I started deep diving into my life and why it mattered and did it matter and what was I trying to accomplish. By this time I'd had some success financially, but I didn't have any significance. Like I think back, if I had been killed that day, let's just reverse it for a minute and say instead of the person that I ran over and killed, what if that had been me stepping off a curb here in Nashville and I was killed? And I said, you know what my legacy, Matt, would have been? My legacy would have been poor kid from Nashville, Tennessee, makes enough money
Mm.
to retire at age 27, and nobody cares. And I'm like, God, that is not what I want my legacy to be. I want my legacy to be that, hey, Matt's life is better as our interaction has materialized over time. Our life is better now because I'm pouring into somebody. My life is better now is because I've helped change the trajectory of somebody's life. I've maybe changed a family tree. I've made an introduction. I've been able to give that encouragement. I've shown empathy to somebody that they've needed at a time in their life where they really needed the sense of encouragement and empathy.
Mm.
And when I started thinking through that, I said, I'm not doing any of these things. Like my focus was on another business, making more money, getting a vacation home, having a sense of
Mm,
security, having a big net worth. And I'm like
mm.
embarrassed. And I'm like, man, I've got to change this path. So it was a real shift for me mentally to do this deep dive and put me on a new path.
Well, well, thank you for sharing that, Aaron. When you started to make this transition to the new path after the accident, what was that like? Kind of discovering transparency and authenticity and vulnerability for you.
Yeah. So I have to take you back even a little further. So in the early 90s, I was headed to the office, and the Chamber of Commerce was hosting a speaker at Luby's Cafeteria in Madison, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. And I almost drove by the entrance and I said, nah, I need to get on to work. And then I thought, no, I want to stop and hear this guy. So I stopped and went in. There was about 20 people there, and this guy was up there speaking. And it sounded like a pretty cool concept. But after the meeting, I went up and introduced myself to him, and I said, hey, I just built a new business about a mile from here. You want to come check it out? And he said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. So I got to go back that way anyway. So he stopped by the office and looked at it. And this guy was starting a radio show here in Nashville. And this is in the early 90s. And he said, hey, I would love for you to consider advertising on my show. And I said, no. I said, I've never heard of you. I have no idea what you're doing. I just heard your presentation and it sounds pretty interesting, but I don't have any interest. He said, I think your show would do well, or your business would do well on my show. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not interested. I get pitched every day for marketing. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a free week. If you'll just try me for a week free, you have nothing to lose. Then we'll have a discussion. So I said, okay, let's do it. So I got on his show, had a commercial promoting, our business. Man, 3 days in, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of people that were coming in our store because the show was being hosted in Nashville. And I called him up and I said, man, I don't know. I don't know what Kool-Aid you're selling, but these people are drinking it and I'm interested in continuing on advertising. He said, well, if you do that, you'll have to sign an annual contract. I said, 3 days ago, I just met you. Now you're wanting me to sign an annual contract. And he said, yeah, if you want to continue on my show, it's an annual contract. And I said, I'm going to do it because business has been so good these past 3 days. I'm going to do it. That was my first encounter with Dave Ramsey.
Oh, wow.
Dave was just starting his show here in Nashville. We both live here in Nashville, and I went on to sponsor his show for 21 years. And Dave and I became very close friends. And after my automobile accident, he invited me to join his mastermind group that he was starting here in Nashville. And he invited 10 other guys. And I went reluctantly. I didn't want to do it because I knew Dave was a hard charger and he was going to find out I had a credit card and he was going to find out that I had real estate debt. He was going to find out that Robin and I argued occasionally. And I'm like, I don't want to go. And Robin said, you should just go try. So I went, fell in love with it, spent 12 years every Wednesday morning for the next decade plus in there. And that is where I learned to be vulnerable and transparent.
Mm,
Surrounding myself with these non-biased, trusted
mhm,
advisors. They didn't have a dog in the hunt. They were able to walk alongside of me and encourage me and help me, and I could them. And we took each other to task. We held each other accountable. We walked the journey together, and we did that weekly for about 12
mm.
years. And so that's the place where I really understood what it meant to be vulnerable and transparent.